So now I'm just going to clean up the workspace so we can actually work on the next thing, which would be to test and then to mock as well. I'll just need to close all of these open files and then we can actually proceed. So of course, you might also have known, but more or less what happens is that within Go, it is a convention that if you have files, like for example, here that have API, it makes sense that if I would want to test the component of API.go file, I would need to create a file next to this with the name API underscore tests .go. So if we wanted to test our APIs, I would have this API test.go. And then of course this can also have the same package but now more or less tests. So that's this is of course differentiated from our main package, and this is actually how we could have it for all our files. So if we had, like, say within our config we had our helpers and maybe env, here we can also create a new file and I can call this env test.go, and again remember we can name it as helper tests like this. And this is how we can individually test all our files and then of course test the functionalities within those files as a unit within our application. But again, also what I like to do would be if I have to test components of our app that of course spans across different units, which can be like into integration tests. What I like to do more or less would be to create a folder and I call this mock. And then what I do is within mock, I try to set up an environment that is very similar to what I have in here. And what it means is that in here, I'm going to have a file called app.env. So it's going to have similar env files to the ones we have over here, for example. And then in here, I can now create all the mocks that I want. For example, I could have one for DB. And this is where I would mock the DB, because again, for this, I may or may not want to, depending on what I'm trying to test, want to write into our actual database. So there might be scenarios, of course, where it is really important to write to the actual database and maybe purge it afterwards, but just to be sure that that functionality is there. But for our own case, I am going to mock the database, and I think also this is also it's also going to prove useful to you, because I mean, you can already write into a database free, that's not a problem. And of course, deleting an item from a database should also not be a problem for you. But mocking might also may or may not be something new to you. But that's totally fine. So, but anyways, I would like to create a file here, and I can call this api.go. Now, this is again going to be different from the one we have up here, because now I will like to test the overall API for all these different handlers that we have here. So that's really the point of what I'm trying to do here. And why do I have this in here inside handlers? I have API like this. That doesn't make sense. No, that doesn't make sense. I need to 1 second. I think I mistakenly moved that in there, but I would like this to be out like this. And this is how I want it to be. So it should be its own package API. And then of course, so this is how it should be. So my bad. I think I mistakenly dragged this into the wrong folder. That's totally wrong. This is how I would like the structure to be. Anyways, so like I was saying, I could go inside of our app mock. And maybe the first thing I would like to do more or less would be to set up the tests, and it's pretty straightforward. I can maybe create a struct here, and I can call this API tests, and it's just going to be pretty straightforward. It's just going to have a router, and then it's going to be of type gene.engine like this, and then I'm just going to have the tests. So this is going to be of type pointer to testing .t like this. And of course, this needs to go away. So it should be like this. And now what I would like to do more or less is to initialize my test. So I can call this API test handler like this. So it's going to, of course, take a pointer to testing.c, and we will not be doing any benchmarks. We could, I am not sure yet, but that depends on how much time we have on our hands, because I don't want this to be quite long. So anyways, I create my router, and now I would really like to use the router that we created within this app. I'm gonna give it uh, um I'm gonna give it a version of V1, or maybe I call it V0 for tests. And then my engine would of course be like this. And now I can say new, maybe API tests would now be of course API tests like this. And now we just need to pass router, be router, and of course T will be T like this. And now what happens, what I can now do more or less is to start writing the tests for this guy. And why do I have this error? So if I go to our main file, I have, yeah, of course, because of the move. So this should be like this. And now, of course, this should be like this. What we can already do more or less would be to go to main, and of course, I think this should be wrong. It should be like this, because now we moved things around. So here I have our main API, and of course, it's not returning anything actually. And what I can do, yeah, it doesn't really return anything, so that's fine. But yeah, I think that's totally fine. But I need to refactor this in such a way that it can return something back to the user, like more or less. So what I have to do more or less would be to split this function into two. But of course, it becomes prevalent as we move on. That's this having out this as the definition of an API actually is wrong, because we have everything all bundled into this singular function, and this would really prove difficult to maintain, to taste, and the rest, because we have a lot of um, in unrelated functionalities all bundled into the same function. Anyways, sorry, what I would like to do here would be to create an API. I can just call it API like this, and of course would be a struct. And it's just gonna have two things. One would be an engine, and of course this would be a router engine that we can get from Gene. And then the next would be of course a server, and this would be of type HTTP server, HTTP server like this. And so this is what we would like to have. And beside this, I would like a function that says maybe start, and it's not gonna return anything. It's not gonna return anything, but it will be a receiver function on our API struct. And what it means now is I would like to create a couple more functions down here. So I'm just gonna duplicate this. So I would like to have one that says init. So this would initialize our server. And then maybe I would have one that says maybe with server, because this will actually be what would prepare the whole setup for us, more or less. And maybe I have another one that's would handle our middleware. So I can say with middleware like this. And I think this is mostly what we would be needing. So now I will really just go ahead and split this into a couple of parts. So maybe I start from here. I would like to create a channel, and this would of course be of type our API. So this would help me to of course handle the initialization of our server, and of course when when we more or less would want to terminate things. This we can also, of course, use to of course listen to the interaction from the user in the end. But yeah, at this point, sorry, what I would like to do here would be to set up our server. And like we said, it should be of type, come on, seriously, HTTP server like this. And then we can add some information here like address. So address should be, I'm going to use sprintf for formatting. And then I'm just going to provide my string. So it's still going to be like we have it. The only difference now is I would like to specify a port. And of course, this should be at just 80. So that's really fine. I think that's all we need for the address. And yep, I think that's looking okayish. Now, of course, I would like to set more information here. Sorry. Handler would be a that's engine like this. And read timeout. I'm probably just going to set this to 10 seconds. And we also need write timeout. And I'm also setting this to 10 seconds like this. And now at this point, of course, I need to return this, of course, to our channel. So we write into our channel, come on, like this. Of course, I need to write in a pointer from our app API. And of course, here needs to pass this way. And then I would like to maybe return API from here. And then what it means is that we can get this, of course, again from the channel. So we can use our return keyword to read out of the channel like this. And that's that's what we would have with our with server. I think that's the point here is quite clear. And the next function that we might have would be this with middleware. So you should be able to take a version, which of course is going to be of type string. And because we have a bunch of middlewares, we would like to return a slice of handler funcs, or less this way. And then we simply return handler funcs like this. And now we simply pass all these base ones we had over here like this. You can just copy this and put it in here. And that's totally fine. Or you can also maybe move this to a new line for aesthetics for it to look nicer and everything. But I think this is already cool. And maybe I just collapse this so we can see all we are doing. So with this function now, we are trying to separate everything. So with this function, we are able to provide all our middlewares. With this, of course, we initialize the server more or less. And now we have two new functions left. So we have the init, and then we also have the sorry, and the start. So would like to use start in the end to actually start the server. But what we can already do here in the init would be actually to now move this over here. So I'll just copy this and bring this up here. And maybe instead of default, I'm just going to use new like this. So I can also maybe what I can also do is, to parse these other default middlewares that we got from Gene, like recovery and logger like this. And so that's at this point, we simply just call this middleware and then we have everything we need. So, but anyways, we have so I will just put this function here, I comment and I say add middlewares. And after this guy, I would now need to populate our engine, of course, with what we just created. And I think that's mostly what we would have. And actually, I can just go ahead and say something like maybe at this point, yeah, I can do some like a dot use yeah, of course, engine words. 1 second. Yeah, of course, maybe before I assign this, yes, before I assign this, I can say r dot use, and I can now say a dot with middlewares like this, and I need to actually pass a version. So what it means, our init should be able to take a version which should be of type string, and then we simply pass this here. And I think that's mostly it, but this version is not being used. Okay, so that means actually we don't need this here for now, so I can actually get rid of this here. That's totally fine. We would need this for the other middleware, so that's totally fine. And now we have set up our middleware. We have initialized, of course, the engine. And the next thing I would want to do now would be more or less to also create a function that's going to add our routes. And I can call this again. Now you might start to get the picture of what we're trying to do, but really just to, we're trying to separate, of course, the parts of our API to separate functions. Anyways, I can call this add routes. And maybe now it will make sense to actually provide the version. And this should not return anything actually. And I can just copy this guy and put it in here. And now we can, of course, simply do this way, a.engine like this. a.engine, a.engine like this. And of course, before we call this, it means we should have already called this one. No, we should have already called init. Oh, sorry, after this point, because then would be sure that if we get to this point, we already have this populated. So it means down here, I can out routes, and now I can say a dot add routes, and now I add my provide version like this. And now, after at this point, when we've added the routes, we have this. And maybe now, of course, we have our middlewares, and now I can actually call with server, because then this will also populate this guy. So I can now say it with server like this. And I think that's totally fine. And now, but this function, I would like to return two things more or less. So it should be able to return the engine and an error, of course, and I'm just going to keep it simple. So, but it's going to return a pointer to engine and, of course, error. So when we call this init, we should be able to get these two things more or less. And then hopefully we have everything we need. Add server, add routes with middleware more or less. And I think that's totally fine. And now we can actually now wrap this up so we can test. And now for start, we are also really going to keep it pretty straightforward. So it's going to take a pointer to an engine like this. And what the main thing is actually going to do for us was simply just to start this server. And what we can, of course, do, we can use a function like this, a coroutine more or less, to start our server. And now we can simply do a.server as server dot listing and serve. And of course, it returns an error, so we have to handle it. If error, and this error is not equal to nil, I think it makes sense here to simply panic actually, but I'll do it this way, panic F, and now just listing, and now I provide actually the ports, but I have to do it this way because I'm doing a string format more or less, and now of course I have my error like this. My PC is really slow today. As you can see down here, it takes a while just to save a file, which doesn't really make sense. Anyways, I think this is saved. And do I need to add more information over here? I think now we can actually do some, maybe provide a way to listen to like inputs from the user, maybe or whatever, but I think I'm fine with this. I'm going to leave it like this. I have a video where I actually added a lot more to the API just to take care of all these other scenarios anyways, but of course feel free to check it out. And maybe what I can already do here is to handle shutdowns. So I have its server and I handle shutdown. But of course for this I need a context. So because if I hover over this, we'll see it requires a context. And then maybe what I can do is I get this from the context package. As you can already see, context dot maybe with timeout, and this again takes background context dot background, and I need to provide some time. So I can make this 2 seconds. So this would be the time for my timeout. But again, if I hover over this, I should get two things back: the context and the cancel func. So I'm gonna name them like that: context cancel. And then now here, if I hover over this, I need to pass a context, and now I can pass this context. But if I hover over it, it returns an error. So I need to handle this error. So this, if this error is not equal to nil, if this error is not equal to nil, again, I'm going to do something quite similar to what I have here, but the only thing might just be that the message would be different. And I can say server shuts down, something like this. I don't know. Totally fine. And maybe I put some trailing dots just to make it look cool. And of course, here I can already defer cancel. That's totally fine. And I think that's really all. We maybe down here I can now maybe print a message and say something like server is exiting, something like this, and I think that's totally fine. If you want, you can create another channel that you would use and listen to inputs from the user, like keyboard interrupt or whatever the case may be, but I think this is fine. And now to bring this all together, I would need to go into this into this new method and now more or less redefine everything. So I have API. API would be, of course, API, and I'm going to leave it as open like this. And now, of course, say API dot init. What is going on? What is going on? Come on. I'm just gonna comment this out. This is really insane. So I'm gonna say API.init. And when I call the init method, I need to pass a version. So of course I get this from up here. That's totally fine. And now I hover over this, I get two things back. So I get my engine and of course an error. And you can already guess we have to handle every error. So if this error is not equal to nil, I'm going to keep this one simple. I'll just panic. That's fine for now. And if everything is well, we can now say API.engine would be R like this, and we return API. So what it means is that I have to return something from up here. and new is totally fine. So, but the cool thing is that we call init, and init should be able, we still are not making use of our stats function, and that's really not good. So, but we have to make use of it actually. So, but what we can now quickly do actually is, if you notice, I can now really get rid of this because why did we have this again? Open this session. Oh, this was for our when we had this session. It's fine. I'm also actually gonna throw it in here if that's fine, because I don't want to lose this. That's fine. I can put it in here, and we can rectify this much later. That's totally fine. And yeah, that should be what did we do with the DB? We did auto migrate, and we can also do that again. That's also fine. And just to make sure this is in this is in it's compatible to what we had before, so that you don't break things, or things don't break down when you check out this session. Just making sure, more or less. Again, you see this is really taking forever, but it's gonna be super annoying. So now I think we have everything, so I can actually go ahead and wipe all of this, and that's fine. And now what we can do more or less is to go back to our main.go, and now it's actually really going to be quite straightforward for us to move things around here. So now what we can now do is, when we call api.new, we should get something back, and that's our API, and we can call it this way. And now we can say a.start, and now we pass the engine. As you can see, now this is much more modular. And if we now can now go back and start writing our test, and I can understand why I moved things around this way. Anyways, I'm getting some warning from our mod file, and I'm simply gonna run a tidy. And that's really what we do now. Now we really jump in to start writing our tests. So I think right now we're actually ready to start, and I think we have already wasted a lot of time. So I'm just gonna try as much as I can to make things as snappy as possible here, but still making sure I pass every possible information I would like to pass. Anyways, I would like to create an API struct like we wanted to do before, and it's gonna have two attributes. So one would be, of course, our what did we call it initially? It was our router, and this, of course, will be our engine router engine, more or less. And then we have tests, so this will again be our for testing, like this. And now what I can do is, maybe I create a function down here, and I can call this. Of course, it's going to be a receiver function on our API. So API tests like this, and I can call this test ping route. I'm not It's not gonna take anything anyways, and or maybe I can call this test miss. So we test everything in here, all the routes under here, we test all of them inside of this one function. And the point is that in here now we can actually come over here and have our router as this, and now we can now create our we can call this API would now be API tests like this, and now we pass our router, yes, like this. Nope, I think this is already, oh, so this, no, do I want to call new here? Oh, of course I can just call engine here, that's also fine. And now I can also call my T, would be this. It's totally fine. So what it means now is to test my miss endpoint. Miss endpoint, I simply call test miss routes like this. And now if I have more to test, maybe I have test out endpoint. I would also add something similar. I'm just going to copy this, duplicate it, put it down here, and then maybe auth, and then of course copy this, put it in here. As simple as that. But of course, to test the first one, what we would want to do more or less was going to use, we will use HTTP test, this one, and I'll need to create a new recorder. So this will be my new recorder. And now I would like to, of course, define the request I would want to make. So this would be making a HTTP, come on, HTTP, that's new request. And I need to provide, of course, the method. So it's going to be a get, and it's going to be the URL is going to be, I think we had slash v1 slash, no, I think we had v0 up there, but yeah, we can also make it v0, that's totally fine. And then we go to miss, and then we go to health like this. And for the body, here I can actually say HTTP, that's no body. If you don't want to do it this way, you can simply provide nil, but I like to do no body. I think this is much more, makes a lot more sense. So I get to do the request and an error, so I can call this my request. I'm going to leave you to handle the error on this one. And now I would like to, of course, make my request, of course, to my router. So I'll say router, I'll now serve my HTTP. And now I need to provide my response writer and of course the request like this. And when the request has succeeded, to test, of course, it's not just about making the request. We'll also need to verify the content of the request and the response being returned, more or less. So to do this, I will use this asserts um, package like this, dot equal like this. And let me see. What is the issue? Could not import of those. So let's do a go mod tidy, that's fine. And we seem to have this, but something is going crazy here. Okay, so this seems to be cool. One more time. And now I would like to, of course, verify a couple of things. So if we looked at this miss endpoint for this get at least, if we go to this handler, what does it do? It's simply 1 second. No, of course, was that what we had? I think this was really for our event handler. Was that what I really wanted to do? Anyways, what I can do is to maybe come in here. 1 second. And maybe it's our API definition. And down here, let's say in the init, maybe at this point, what I can do more or less would be to just to create some dummy, or maybe I can clean this up because it's not supposed to, I'm just going to call this maybe event, and I'm going to rename this to events, event.go, and I'm going to again call this add event routes. And now I need to update some things, maybe with middleware, no routes rather, so add event routes. And now I can now add my, because I thought I had this miss endpoints. I'm actually going to rename this to events like this. And now I can create a new folder and I can call this miss. And maybe in here I can add a one endpoint. I call this health.go. And actually what I'm gonna do more or less would be to just get the base implementation from Gene. So I'm gonna quickly, because I don't want to waste time, go Gene. So we go to Gene here, and then we go to, let's say, get learn more, documentation, introduction, quick start. And yes, we can actually just copy this. And I'm just gonna copy this part. And in here, I can call this health handler. It takes again like before, in context, and what does it return? Something like this. And I'm just gonna remove this part because this is what I copied from Gene website. And what is the problem? API, of course, event. And now we can call this event. And of course we need to go into this event and change the package event, and this one as well, event, and now we should be fine. So this one should also be fine now. Exactly. So we can now actually come in here and add a new file, miss.go, and I have to rename because I typed that so fast that I messed it up. Anyways, I can copy this guy quickly. That's totally fine. Then come in here, package API, and I can now add my miss routes. And this would be miss, and I don't need this middleware here. And this would just be at health. And then we can now get this from health handler, and then I can get rid of this. Of course, we don't need to call the function. So it should be fine like this. And now if everything should be fine. Yes, so if we come back here, we can now add, no, we go to our add routes, and we add miss routes. We have our engine, and we have our version like this, very straightforward. And now if we come back in here, we have this at miss/health. And now if we come back in here, we can now quickly, of course, make our request and now test what we get back from this. So what I can simply do is, of course, I need to pass tests this way. Oh, sorry, wrong tests. And the next thing I would need to pass more or less would be what I expect. So HTTP status okay. I think this should be 200. And then the next thing I need to, of course, want to verify would be the code of the request. So what we are doing more or less is to start our server this way, but then we make a request to this endpoint, which was what we've defined over here. And then we try to verify what we get back. So we should, if we look here again, guys, this is supposed to return a 200 status code. And I don't like to hard code this like this. I really don't like to. Status okay. Okay should be 200. And so if I go back to our app, it should be yes, okay. And maybe what else I can test more or less would be the message we get here. But anyways, let's run the test first. I can say go tests, raise, and maybe I provide this way. And then fingers crossed, hopefully if everything works fine, then of course we are on the right path. So it seems our test passed. If you look over here, more or less, you see what actually has happened. So let's scroll up a little bit. So we had this in here. One second. Yes, of course. So we have our API, which is down here. Of course, we have a test file here, but it's actually empty. If you remember, we had this in here. Inside config helpers, this guy, but it's empty. But even though it's prepended as test, it still gets run, but of course it's empty. But anyways, there was the only one that was actually run. And maybe what we can also verify, since we are doing this more or less, would be the response that we get back. And to do that, it's also pretty straightforward. We do exactly what we have over here. So we have assert using equal. Of course, if you look through, there are a lot of functions that you could use. And now I want to check the message that's returned, and this message I want to get it from the response, the body, and I want to turn this to a string. So if we go back here, this is what we should get: message equal to pong, and I will try to catch that here. So it should be something like this, and then here I need to, the first thing would be message, and out here would be, of course, pong like this, but again we need to escape this, and now we can provide pong in here. And where did the C come from? So like this, and now we can close this up and then run the test again. Maybe I set vet to off, and then we run this one more time. And now, of course, this succeeds. We don't get any error. So what it, like we said initially, now what we can see happen is we have the option to actually start our server and then make requests to them. So what it means is that you can make requests to any of these endpoints, try to simulate a failure, so we can even do something like, let's say, I can copy this, for example, put it in here, and I can test maybe, I see something like tests 404 routes, and in here I can maybe provide something like non-existent, because we don't really have an endpoint like this. And now we can actually test not found for, sorry, I think it's status not found, this one, because it should be 404. And then we test the code, and of course, like I told you, it's actually pretty straightforward. All we need to do is say our API, we say non-existent endpoints, and we say API that's test 404 route like this, and then we can of course run our test one more time, and we see this actually succeeds. So we've covered how we can actually test our API. Again, like I said, what we can do more or less is to go inside for each of these individual files, create test files, and test them all. And also, I have a video already in the past where I try to explain how to do testing in case you are not familiar with this. So you can always come around and check this out. If you're new to this, I'm going to leave a link in the description as well, so you can have this handy. But other than that, the last thing I would really want to show you in this session, more or less, would be to show you how we can mock. So in case, for example, we have this DB over here, and we would like to mock how the functionality, what we can really do is, because we're working with SQL DB, we can actually use SQL mock from Datadog. And it's actually pretty straightforward. I can actually come in here and create a function, and I can call this new database like this. And that's mostly what I would want to do. And but what would happen, the important thing is I will use SQL mock from Datadog like this, and I don't think I have this installed, so I'll need to of course tidy. So I'm going to go mod tidy to have this installed. And of course, this is quickly installed. I can close this up so we have a lot more space to work with. So we have this installed. As you can see, we get three things back. We have SQLDB, SQL mock, and of course an error. And that's actually what I can have over here. SQLDB, mock, and error. These are the three things we get back. And yeah, let's just handle this. So if this error is not equal to nil, and maybe we do a fatal, so log.fatal, but I'd like to do a formatting more or less, and I can simply add some error here. Maybe I do something fancy like this. I say SQL mock new, and then here I would like to provide the actual message, which I can do like this. But if there is no error, I can actually now work with this as I did with my normal DB. So what it means is that I can use my MySQL driver like this. MySQL, the driver, of course, like this, that new. And what is this? Undefined MySQL. Of course, I have this up here. Now, of course, I need this from GORM. So I can get this from gom.io /driver and MySQL like this. And hopefully I have this installed exactly. And now I can now provide the config. So MySQL.config like this. And just like we've used the other one, so con would be my SQL DB connection. And then driver name, I would just set this to MySQL like this. And of course, this should get me a dialector. So I can initialize this here, dialector like this. And now I can actually do maybe run some query, maybe ping the database or something. But yeah, maybe what I would like to do here is open database con. And because I would like to use GOM, so gom.open. And of course, I provide the dialector, and then I need to provide some more config like this. And now, just like we did before, you can either provide more, but I'm just going to leave this empty for now, like this. So this is fine. And this would return a DB or error. And I'm just going to copy this again, bring this down here to handle this error. And then now what I can do, of course, maybe would just be to go ahead and return DB, mock and SQLDB like this. And of course, we are not returning anything from our function. So I would like to return three things, as you can already see. One of them would be, of course, a pointer to gom.db. The next one would be SQL mock, and the last one would be pointer to SQL.db, like this. And so that's actually one way we can use this. And then with this, more or less, as you can see, is a pointer to gom.db. You can actually use it as we've been using it in our app. Like here, we are opening our connection, we get in a DB here, and then we use this. And then what you can really just do is to go ahead, make insertions, create tables, and everything, of course, would be with this mock. Because again, like I said, we would not want to write into our actual database that we have on the cloud on the Azure side. So that's why I'm keeping this, of course, within the mock that we are doing right now. So you can, of course, test this individually, whereby you insert into this database, insert items, and then query, and then try to assert what's like we've already done over here with this assert function to assert the response that you get back and everything. And of course, it should be pretty straightforward. And yep, if for some reason you are still having questions or problems with this, of course, feel free to leave me a message and I can provide you further information. Maybe I can show you quickly one way we can actually use this is maybe if we come over here. Maybe I can just show an example in here. Let's say we have a function here, and then let's say we are still doing all this under our API tests, and we would want to say, let's say tests auth endpoints or whatever. I don't know, auth routes, something like this. I think we have one already. Yes, of course. So we can actually put it in here. And so what we can really do more or less would be we can initialize our DB mock and SQL DB this way. And we can get this from our new database like this. And then we have all of these three. And now, as you can, of course, see, we have this instantiated already. So what you could do, for example, would be maybe here already we can defer SQL. Let's go away. SQL DB, not close. We defer the closure of our connection. And now what you can already do is mock, use the mock this way, that expect begin. And then after this, we can now do things like maybe create tables, for example. We can do expect exec like this. Let's say we would want to expect the creation of our user table. I can do something like this, create table and call it users. And of course, maybe I can do it this way to catch every possible thing. So I don't need to specifically add every item that needs to be passed in here. And then in the end, of course, I need to do mock.expect commit. Of course, not close, because of course, when you've prepared your query and made the query, of course, you have to commit this. But what we can already do up here with our DB before we do this would be we do a DB dot we use the migrator, and then we maybe create a table. And then to create a table, we can actually pass models.user like this. And so we try to create our table use this way using this GOM-DB that we already have here wrapped over our SQL DB connection. And then we try to use the migrator from GOM to create this table. And then we try to assert if we actually made this query. Because again, this under the hood should make this query if everything is fine. And then, of course, from here, you can now go ahead and maybe call the endpoint like create user, and then you assert the query that was made, and then maybe even make a query to the database, try to fetch all users and see if actually something was written into the database and stuff like that. There's a lot you can actually do with this. But I will let you try this out yourselves, and then, of course, give me feedback. I would like to know if it actually worked out for you. If you had problems, whatever the case might be, just please feel free to reach out to me, and we can start a conversation around these topics. Anyways, it's already a long one, but I'm glad I was able to show you most of what I wanted to show you today. And we are actually more or less coming to the end of this session. We have like 3 more or 4 more sessions to go, and then that will be all. Anyways, guys, that will be all for this tutorial. Of course, again, if you are new to our channel, don't forget to go ahead and subscribe, and of course ask me questions or leave comments, whatever the case might be. And until next time, guys, have a lovely evening, and bye bye.